All right, let's dive into one of the most incredible stories in the history of our planet. Seriously, we're talking about the multi-million-year epic of how plants went from basically pond scum to completely conquering and reshaping the entire world. And it really all boils down to this one simple question. I mean, think about it. For most of its history, Earth's landmass was just rock, a barren, lifeless wasteland. So how in the world did we get from that to the green planet we know today? Well, that's the story we're going to unpack right now. Just try to get this picture in your head. 500 million years ago, you've got endless rock, dust, brutal sunshine. There's no soil, no trees, no grass, nothing. Now, flash forward to today. Sprawling rainforests, huge grasslands, every shade of green you can possibly imagine. The sheer scale of that change is mind-blowing, and it was all driven by the relentless, step-by-step innovation of plants. So, where did this all kick off? Well, the story starts in the water. The great ancestors of every plant you see today were basically just green algae, floating around happily in ancient ponds and oceans. But then, some of them started to make what was probably the riskiest move in the history of life. They started creeping onto dry land. And boy, did that create a whole new world of problems. And let me tell you, the challenges were huge. I mean, first off, you leave the water, you risk drying out and dying, like instantly. There's no buoyancy anymore, so gravity is suddenly this crushing force. You have to figure out a totally new way to breathe, to exchange gas with air instead of water. And maybe the biggest problem of all, how do you reproduce when your sperm needs water just to swim? Solving these puzzles was the first great test. The first plants to kind of crack the code were the bryophytes. Just think of the mosses and liverworts you see today. These guys were the true pioneers. They came up with waxy coatings to hold in water and tiny little pores to breathe. But that's about as far as they got. They had no internal support, so they had to stay tiny and hug the ground, and they were still completely chained to the water's edge to reproduce. It was a huge first step for sure, but a very limited one. Living in a flat green carpet on the ground is fine. Until someone else figures out how to grow over you and steal all the sunlight. And that's exactly what happened next. It kicked off this massive evolutionary arms race, the race for the sky. Suddenly, it wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about competing. Which leads to this really fundamental engineering problem, right? Animals, we have skeletons for support. But a plant? How does a plant manage to defy gravity and build its own skyscraper without a single bone in its body? The answer to this question would literally change the face of the planet. And the answer was vascular tissue. This is, hands down, one of the most brilliant inventions of evolution. It's the plant's internal plumbing and its skeleton, all rolled into one. You've got these specialized cells that form rigid little tubes, the xylem that can suck water up from the ground and provide amazing structural support. It was a total biological game changer. What's so amazing is that this one innovation solved a bunch of problems all at once. It gave plants the strength to grow tall, it gave them a system to get water all the way up to those new heights, and it let them dominate their neighbors in the fight for sunlight. This is what sparked the Devonian explosion of plant life and let them build the world's very first forests. Now, this new ability to get big and complex also caused a major internal shift. See, those early mosses were mostly dominated by their reproductive stage. But with vascular tissue, the main leafy plant body, the sporophyte, that's what became the star of the show. It's a perfect example of how one new piece of hardware, a new structure, completely changed the plant's entire life strategy, making it way more robust for life on land. Okay, so now plants can grow tall. We've got these massive forests of ferns and other early plants. But they still had an Achilles heel. A big one. To reproduce, their sperm still had to swim through a thin film of water to find an egg. They had conquered height, but they were still prisoners of the pond. The next big revolution had to fix reproduction. And that fix was the seed. Honestly, the seed is one of the greatest inventions in the history of life. It's so much more than just an embryo. It's a perfect little life support system in a box. You've got the tiny baby plant, a tough protective coat to keep it safe, and a packed lunch of stored food to give it a running start. It's a survival pod for the next generation. The difference here is just night and day. A spore is just a single, vulnerable cell with zero food reserves. A seed is a complex, multicellular, protected, and well-fed little embryo. This single innovation finally completely severed that last tide of water for reproduction. It freed plants to go and conquer the dry interiors of the continents. And oh, did they conquer. After seeds first showed up, the seed plants, what we call the gymnosperms, like pine trees and conifers, they just took over. For over 150 million years, through the entire age of the dinosaurs, the world was dominated by these tough seed-bearing plants. But another even bigger revolution was brewing just around the corner. So this brings us to the final and maybe the most brilliant chapter in the whole green conquest. A new group of plants came up with this radical new strategy. Instead of just leaving things to the wind and to chance, they figured out how to recruit animals as allies in their quest to reproduce and expand. And the secret weapons of these new plants, the angiosperms, were the flower and the fruit. Think about it. A flower is basically a sophisticated advertising billboard. It uses colors, smells, and sugary nectar to attract animals, like bees, to do the work of carrying their pollen directly to another flower. And the fruit? Well, that's just a clever bribe, wrapping the seeds up in a tasty package to trick animals into eating them, and then dispersing them far and wide. And this strategy was an absolute runaway success. Pollination became incredibly efficient, seed dispersal went global, and on top of that, a lot of these flowering plants could reproduce much faster, which let them adapt and evolve way more quickly than the old-school gymnosperms. The result? A complete planetary takeover that started in the Cretaceous period and continues today. This little cheat sheet here just sums up the whole journey perfectly. You can see the progression so clearly. You start with the bryophytes, tiny, no plumbing, completely stuck by the water. Then you get the ferns, who get that vascular tissue and grow tall but still need water for reproduction. Then boom, the gymnosperms invent the seed and break free. And finally, the angiosperms add flowers and fruit to totally master pollination and dispersal. Each group just built on the breakthroughs of the one before it. So as we start to wrap this up, you can really boil this entire grand conquest down into a few key, game-changing steps. It really is like climbing an evolutionary ladder, where each new rung let plants reach new heights and conquer brand new territories. And here they are, the 4 major leaps. First up, making that dangerous jump onto land. Second, developing vascular tissue to win the race for the sky. Third, inventing the seed to finally break their dependence on water. And fourth, evolving flowers and fruit to turn animals into their partners. I mean, that is the blueprint for how you take over a planet. This quote really just nails it. The entire story of plant evolution is a story of becoming more independent and more efficient. Every single major breakthrough was about solving a problem that let plants live more freely, reproduce more effectively, and move into parts of the world that were totally off limits before. And that just leaves us with one final thought. Plants have already engineered our atmosphere. They created our soil. They built the very ecosystems that all other life, including us, depends on. They've had at least 4 world-shattering revolutions so far. So the question is, what's next? What brilliant new innovation are they working on right now that might just change the world all over again?